Auntie Joe, hello, I'm Maya Grace in case you don't know, and today we're going to be learning how to make the Batty bows in my bow pack. All of the bow pack patterns are designed to supplement all of the upcoming Lolita patterns. In this pattern you'll find the long bow and its 4 variations, the tiny little basic and big old bows and all of the variations of them, the baby bat and batty bows, which are what we're talking about today, and the tea bag brooch and the little heart decoration. These patterns are all on one printable PDF file, and all of the video tutorials are split up into chunks so that it's easier to find what you're looking for when you go to make a project. The batty bows are very similar to the basic bows and even work in combination with those pattern pieces. For example, you could stack a little baby bat on top of a basic bow, similar to the way that I've stacked the bats here. But otherwise, just the batty bow pattern will give you 3 variations. The baby bat, which works great either as a bodice bow or as a hair bow for little twin tails. The batty bow, just plain by itself, which would look great as a skirt pickup detail or as a head bow. And of course, for full vampiric drama, you can do a double layered bat bow like the one I have right here. This bow works best in light to medium weight fabrics, and it can be done with or without interfacing. Using interfacing is going to make it stiffer and a little bit more cartoony or cosplay looking, so I would use caution when doing that. That's a mistake that I have made with bows a lot in the past, because having it drape and lay softer gives it more of an elegant kind of look. If you're planning on using a heavyweight fabric, what you're going to want to do is use a lighter weight lining fabric for the back of the bow and use your fashion fabric on the front. So for example, if you were using a velvet, I would strongly recommend getting a satin lining fabric in the same color and using that for the backing fabric and your velvet for the fashion fabric on the front to reduce bulk and save your sanity. Enough talking about the bats. Let's make some.
For both sizes of the bat bow and the baby bat bow, you will want to cut out 2 pieces on fold like you see me doing here. The little baby bat pieces are really easy to cut out of scrap fabrics, and your grain line doesn't really matter for this pattern piece, so you can feel free to squeeze it out of whatever fabric you have laying around. Before pinning and sewing your baby bat or your batty bow, what you're going to want to do is take one of the pattern pieces. I provided 2 of each so that you don't have to reprint to resew the baby bat, because you're going to want to cut along those dotted lines so that you can very accurately mark the stitch lines on your pattern piece. I'm just using one of those water-soluble fabric pencils that you get at any craft store, but fabric chalk would work very well here as well, or of course disappearing ink markers are an option as well. Whatever you prefer, honestly. You just need a very precise line that you'll be able to follow later. And once you've finished marking the backside of one of your pieces, you're going to place them right sides together and pin them well. Then take your bat over to the sewing machine and follow your stitch lines as exactly as possible. You can probably see me lifting my foot and leaving my needle in the down position to rotate my work, and I do this fairly often even on my curves and not just my quarters. This is going to make everything look much crisper when I turn it right sides out, and it keeps me from losing my mind. And speaking of turning the bat insides out, you are going to want to backspace at the beginning and end of your stitch line and leave a 1.5 inch gap at either the top or the bottom edge of your bat bow. And whenever you finish your bow, wrapping the ribbon around and scrunching it is going to cover up the inside of that hole, and no one will ever see it, so don't worry about ladder stitching it or anything like that. The last thing you want to do with your bow piece before turning it right sides out is to trim all of these corners and clip your curves, just so that they'll be crisper whenever they're turned right sides out. Be careful not to cut any of your thread lines, as that's what's literally holding your bat together. But other than that, don't be afraid to take little clips and take little notches out of anywhere on your fabric. Experiment with making as many as possible, because honestly, the more that you have, the more likely your bat will turn right sides out and look cohesive and not have awkward breaks. Because if you don't have enough clips on your curves, whenever you turn it right sides out, it's going to have a lot of harsh angles, and that's going to break the line of the curve and not be as visually appealing. And now with your curves clipped, it's time to turn your bat bow right sides out. You're going to want a chopstick or a bodkin to really poke those little spiky bits out and make sure that they're stiff peaks. Otherwise, your bat is just going to look kind of like a butterfly. Now, while you can just stack the baby bat on top of the batty bow for a stacked back bow, I find that it's easier to use one layer of fabric and finish the edge of it with a satin stitch. So instead of sewing two pieces right sides together and turning them right sides out, you're just going to send one pattern piece through your machine and satin stitch all the way along the line that you would otherwise follow. And then you'll clip your raw edges off of it, being very careful not to cut into the stitches of your satin stitch because then they'll all come unraveled and that would be tragic. Doing it this way reduces bulk and makes sure that you're going to have a bow that drapes nicely and isn't anywhere near as heavy or stiff as you would otherwise get. It helps it feel less like a costume and more like a garment. And then here I'm just going to sew my main bow the same way that I would otherwise, and I am using a contrasting fabric for this, just so that all my hard work of making a second bat does show. But you could do this in a monochromatic color scheme and just use the second bat to add some texture. And the great thing about this pattern pack is that all of the bows are essentially finished and assembled in the same way. Now let's put the whole thing together. To start with, I'm going to thread my needle and put that aside for a second. Once I have my needle threaded, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my bow in half. In my opinion, these bows look the best whenever there is a prominent fold in the center and then one fold on each side so that the ends are facing inwards toward the back. In other words, they look the best when there are three distinct peaks. After creating that gather with a running stitch, what I'm going to do is a securing stitch, and I like to wrap my thread around my whole bow and then do one more securing stitch before attaching the bow ribbon. I put my needle through on one end and I pull tightly, and then I fold the raw edge under and I whip stitch the fold down to the rest of the bow. Another way to do this is to do a very loose running stitch on the center fold of the bow. Make sure that the top and the bottom edge are folded toward the back of the bow because this will look more professional and finished. I do a securing stitch and wrap my thread all the way around once or twice before doing one more securing stitch. And next I'm going to put my needle right through that bow ribbon, pull it tightly, fold the raw edge of my ribbon under, and then I do a whip stitch to attach it to the rest of the bow. This makes it easy to slip a safety pin through the bow ribbon and attach it to anything, or alternatively slip a hair clip through the bow ribbon and use it like a hair bow. And this method will work just as well for a bat-shaped bow versus a rectangular bow. It's just the simplest and easiest method to use.
In the description box below is where you'll find the pattern for these little bat bows in case they fly away and you need to make more. It's also where all of my other free patterns are, such as the Cloud Queen bloomers and the headdress pattern, and there are other fun patterns on the way and coming soon. This channel and my free PDF sewing patterns are only made possible by viewers like you. And speaking of viewers like you, if you've ever followed one of my tutorials or just made something that you want to show off or know someone else who makes things that you want to show off and hype them up a little bit, there's a Google form linked in the down below where you can show me the cool things you or a friend have made and tell me about it and the artists themselves for a chance to be featured on Keep Sewing On. But as always, if you liked this video, be sure to give it a like so that more awesome people like you can see it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, friends! Hit! I don't know if that came out good. I hope it did. If I knew how to do CGI, now would be the time to do it. And like have the bats like flying around me or something.